ladies and gentlemen, in the blue corner, standing at a sleek 5'11", 245 pounds, the tumultuous tempest of technique, Thomas Lilly. And in the red corner, at a curvaceous 5'11", 315 pounds, the jovial juggernaut of judgment, John Cheryl Sheridan. A meeting of the masters of mastication. Turn your attention as they delve deep into all things lifting and more. This is Peak Speak.
We are in business.
The business of producing free content for no return.
Yes, low quality, poorly organized free content. Our favorite kind.
Hashtag professional.
Oh, you killed it. You've been killing it all week with the cafe laptop coffee post. I'm loving it.
Yeah, dude, I'm a fucking entrepreneur, all right? I have to hustle and grind 24/7, 365.
Look, man, the grind life isn't easy.
It ain't easy. But
you think of how hard it is to get the perfect angle when the coffee's there and you just need to drink it. And it's
man,
just
you know, the worst part was
the
one I took yesterday of the Anatomy Trains book and my coffee. Then about half an hour later, the sun came up through a great window. I was like, damn, I should have waited half an hour and got the sunlight in.
Did you get another coffee?
I did, but only when I was leaving.
You do the have a coffee there and then take away.
Well, because if I return home from a cafe without a coffee, I will be murdered.
I understand. Right, I have a question for you.
Excellent. I like questions.
How was the novice comp with the MX division?
It was really good, man. So we ended up with, I think we had 62 lifters in the end.
Fuck yeah.
And we had 7 competitors in the MX division, which was really cool.
Fire out.
So a few of those were local. There was a couple of people like Jax and Andy that came down from Sydney. There was one person, Drea, who came up from Melbourne and then drove straight back after the competition, which
far out
is an incredibly impressive feat.
Yeah.
But it was a really good day, man. We had a minor technical hiccup at the start of the day. Our version of Next Lifter, the bar loading chart wasn't updating properly. Fortunately, we were also trialing a new competition platform called
the Open
Lifter. Yeah, it's from the people that are behind right? Open Powerlifting, the website. And fortunately, one of their contributors who does a bunch of their data entry and stuff is a guy that I've done some coaching with in Canberra.
Yeah.
So he came along and helped us run it. There was some things I've sort of submitted as feedback that I'd like to see changed a little bit. We had an issue with the way our multiple screens are set up. When the resolution changed so it could be shown properly on all the screens, you couldn't see the names. We actually ended up having to run both systems. The Open Lifter was on the platform, so the loaders had a loading chart. And then Next Lifter was on all our other screens, so they could still see the lifting order. So there was a bit of fucking around with that, and that was a fairly stressful hour or so while we tried to figure that out. But we got it there in the end. And I think overall the Open Lifter system has some real promise. It's definitely cleaner and just a bit nicer to look at than Next Lifter.
Yeah, Next Lifter's horrendous.
Yeah, it's stupid. So I think we'll probably run it again for states and see how it goes. And sort of we'll do the same thing and run them in tandem again. Rather than just making the switch completely, because sometimes that's a bit dangerous. But yeah, overall I had no real complaints with it. A couple of little minor changes that I'd make just because so there's a couple of things that I don't think maybe people don't do in other comp situations. So one of them is for a novice comp, because we don't do weight classes or anything, I generally organize the flights based on openers.
Yep.
So I just put everyone's details in and then go into Excel and sort all the data based on openers, and then assign flights that way. But the way OpenLifter works is you have to enter the flight when you enter the person's details.
Oh, okay. So you have to put it in the order already.
Yeah.
Well,
So
it'll organize it by opener, but you have to put them in the right flights.
Yeah. So for a GPC comp, from my point of view, that's fine because we know everyone's body weight, so they're just organized by weight classes. But for a novice comp where I'm doing that somewhat after the fact, it's a bit less conducive to that. So, but Matt was like, "Oh yeah, that's a great point. I haven't thought about that before." So we've submitted a few things as our feedback, and hopefully that'll all get taken on board, and it'll be good.
It's the kind of stuff that only someone who runs lots of meets is going to understand.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's going to be really helpful feedback for them for sure.
Yeah, exactly. And I think we were the third or fourth meet to use it. Like it's only relatively new and still in a beta phase. So I'm sure getting a bunch of feedback, like you said, from someone who's run. I've run like 40 something powerlifting meets over the last 5 years. So. And I've been to hundreds, so I know what to look for. I'm still bugging the Ruchis to sell me their comp system because it's amazing. Their
system is so good,
dude. It's unequivocally the best setup for a comp I've ever seen. But because they're computer nerds, they've built it all themselves, and it's actually in a position where they can't distribute it in its current form.
I get you.
Because I've been bugging them for ages to sell it to me, but. They won't, the bastards. Otherwise, man, it went off without a hitch. We had a really good day. We gave out best lifter awards based on, people being nice and doing well and, being supportive and all that sort of stuff, which was really good. And I got heaps of really good feedback, especially from all the MX lifters, which was nice. They were all super stoked with the environment and... it was really inclusive and there was no weird questions and it was just like they were, part of the group, which is what it should be. So,
nice.
Overall, I was really stoked with it. It was a long day. Like I got to the gym at 8:30 and I walked out at 6:30 or something like that. But it was a good time.
Yeah. Excellent. All right. So, on the subject of novice competitions, today we're talking all things powerlifting 101. So, kind of an intro to powerlifting, I suppose you'd put it.
Yeah, I think that's the best way to describe it. I think the intention behind the episode is to give you a one-stop shop for all the information you need to know for your first powerlifting meet.
Yeah, and I think... in terms of getting into powerlifting, there's a lot more to cover than what we can do in this short snippet of time, but we will do our best to provide the most succinct and relevant information that we can, right?
Yes, I think so. So I think, especially in Australia, powerlifters or prospective powerlifters are quite lucky, certainly compared to when you and I got into the sport, because the prevalence of unaffiliated novice comps is so much higher these days that you don't have to join a federation. You don't have to do all those things that, 5-10 years ago you would have had to in order to do your first comp. And for me, that's why we run novice comps, right? We do it as a way to lower the barrier to entry for powerlifting so that more people can get into the sport. So they're competitions that aren't affiliated with a federation. You don't have to wear a soft suit. You can just turn up in what you'd normally wear to the gym and lift some weights. Because ultimately you don't need to go and spend a shitload, or at least in my opinion, you shouldn't have to go and spend a shitload of money on a bunch of equipment and a membership for a sport that you don't know whether you actually enjoy it or not.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, we are in an extremely lucky position. I mean, I'm privileged enough to have traveled to a lot of countries and seen what they have to offer in terms of powerlifting. Not only that, both you and I have mutual international friends that come here and tell us there's nothing like this where we are. Even in the States, we've got this network, this system of powerlifting style gyms across the country that, like you say, are regularly running unaffiliated novice meets, and it just lowers that barrier of entry massively. And that's I believe, what's facilitated the massive growth of the sport in Australia,
without a doubt.
almost exclusively, because we've been involved in the sport for many, many, many years, and before that started happening, it's kind of been in the last 5 or 6 years. Before that was the case, the sport was stagnant. It wasn't really growing at all. It was just kind of sitting there, and yeah.
Yeah, man. So the first novice comp I ran in Canberra was 2014. It was like a push-pull that we did on Australia Day as a homage to the original PTC comps.
Yeah.
And I think we had 22 lifters or something, like 23 lifters, certainly less than 30. We had 62 on Sunday. We've got another novice comp in May that will probably sell out the 60 spots a month or two out. So it's, and that's a common story across the country. The Ruchis in Perth are selling out novice comps 6 months in advance. You know, I know Marcus and those guys are all in Melbourne are also selling out novice comps pretty regularly. So just the sheer number of competitors, not necessarily top end competitors, but number of people in the sport has grown so exponentially over the last few years. And I totally agree with you that it's these novice comps where people don't have to be quite as intimidated by the process, you know?
Yeah, for sure. It's an interesting way to look at it. Like, is it a chicken or an egg thing? Because, like, powerlifting gyms have grown at the same time as powerlifting has grown. It's like, what's come first? Is it like the sport has grown and that's facilitated the need for more powerlifting style gyms, or the popping up of powerlifting style gyms and running these meets has facilitated the growth of the sport? And really, I think it's a little bit of both. Yeah, but it's just kind of interesting to sit back and kind of reflect that, you know, you and I have both been a big part of this journey in our respective areas, and then therefore in the country, right?
Yeah.
And it's exactly the same with the growth of the popularity of coaching, right? Because, you know, the coaches that are taking people on board, I mean, my goal with my lifters is that, okay, well, powerlifting provides you a tangible outcome. So even if we don't label it as powerlifting, it's like, okay, well, you've been training with me for a while now. We build your training based on squat, bench, deadlift. Hey, there's this opportunity for this novice comp to kind of test out where you are and have something to work towards. And that provides tangible goals, which gives us job security because our clients keep getting results and have something to work towards, so they keep coming back. But not only that, it then facilitates the growth of the sport. They fall in love with the sport, and we have another powerlifter, right?
Yeah, and that's
it's really...
I think that point of, like, it being tangible and measurable, like, that's the thing, and the biggest reason I explain to a lot of people for why you should do a first meet. Well, like, it gives you something to train for. If you're in your 30s and you've done no real competitive sport for most of your life, having a tangible end point to your training is also a really useful thing, I find. And even if you don't end up making that switch from training in novice comp or competing in novice comps to competing in a federation of some kind, you're still chasing the goal, right? It's still that end date. It's still chasing progress, and ultimately gives you something to move towards.
For sure. Okay, so, you know, I'm a new lifter. I'm getting started out. What's your advice to me? What are you going to tell me about how I should be prepared for getting into powerlifting?
Look, I think if you're a lifter who's, let's say you're someone who's been to the gym before, you've done some squatting and some benching and some deadlifting, so you're not a complete novice to the gym environment and how the movements work and stuff, I'd say just do a meet. You know, I don't think you need to change your training drastically or buy a bunch of specialist equipment or do any of those sort of things. I think you just need to turn up and experience the sport. So, you know, I'm not necessarily going to give you some complex peaking cycle for your first powerlifting meet. We're just going to treat it as another training day. You know, maybe we do a day a week out to just kind of get a rough idea of where your attempt selection is going to be for openers. But beyond that, it's about just turning up and having some fun. Like, for me, it makes no sense to invest a bunch of time and energy into a sport that you don't know whether you like or not. So you may as well just turn up and have a go first, see if you enjoy it, and then at the very least, you've got a baseline for measuring your performance going forward. Right? Because at that point, you've got, okay, well, if this is what I can do with no preparation and just turning up on the day, give it 3 months and put in a proper training cycle, then all of a sudden you've made this huge amount of progress in 3 months and you've gotten so much better as a lifter. You enjoy that second meet even more than you did the first one. And by that point, you've got the bug and you're done. Like, that's it. Now you're a power lifter and you can keep pursuing that.
Yeah. I think because that's great general advice. I think the hard thing, there is going to be, a small percentage of people that maybe don't fit that advice completely. And what I mean by that is the definition of novice is really talking about comp experience.
Yes, exactly. And that's something that a lot of people misconstrue. Like, oh, you're not a novice because you squat 300. Well, if you've never lifted in a competition before, you're still a novice. You might be a very, very strong novice, but you're still a novice.
Yeah, so, there's going to be these rare examples of, like, a high-level strongman competitor or a high-level bodybuilding competitor that has the competitive drive, that understands the idea of high-level competition, high-level sport, if you can call bodybuilding a sport. That's gonna...
Honestly.
Honestly, compared to, like, it's an interesting discussion, and this is going off on a tangent now. It's an interesting discussion.
That's our favourite thing to do, though.
Yeah, because... it's all well and good to say the measurement of the sport is aesthetic and so it's subjective, but it's like, okay, well, so is gymnastics, so is figure skating. It's like what I think diminishes the idea of bodybuilding a sport is that the actual act of the competition isn't highly athletic. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's literally a pageant. It's literally just posing and strutting your stuff. That's not to undermine the work that goes into it to produce that end result, because, that work, that athletic pursuit in the gym, I guess if you call that the sport, but it's really not the sport, is it? The sport is the competition aspect. So comparing it to gymnastics is then not exactly a side-by-side comparison, because what they do in gymnastics is highly athletic the day. I guess it's the difference between the training and the actual sport itself. But anyway, that's because I love bodybuilding. I'm not going to lie. I like watching it. I like the pursuit of it. And I'm talking like bodybuilding, not
board shorts.
Not board shorts and abs, yeah. Anyway, so yes, there's this like defined distinction between, I guess, a novice powerlifter and a novice in general, like a novice sporting person, I guess. Because, if I have someone that's a higher level competitor at something, they're going to want to take it a little bit more seriously.
Yeah,
and I don't have a problem with that. I'm not going to be like, oh no, man, just forget about it, just have fun.
Yeah, no, not
I'm
at
saying
all.
that's what you do. Like, I'm just kind of expanding that option and saying, for those of you who are listening, who are looking at getting into powerlifting and you're already some sort of high level competitor, it's okay to treat it seriously, but understand that the general people that you're going to be competing with on that day are people that may not have done much in terms of sport in their life, are relatively new to the sport, and the whole environment is supposed to be supportive, fun, encouraging, and develop the growth of the sport. So,
like, for example, at our novice comp on the weekend, we had, I think our youngest lifter was 16 and our oldest was in her early 60s. And we had everyone in between, and the 16-year-old's like a rugby player that lifts weights for footy and does all those sort of things, and then the 63-year-old woman's a woman who got into lifting as a way of being more fit and healthy, and now they're both competing on the same platform on the same day, and the environment supports both of them. That's the big thing I always try and promote at our novice comps, and it's part of the reason we introduced the MX division, is it's not about the competition side of things. This isn't about turning up to a novice comp and winning. It's about turning up to a novice comp and having a good time, enjoying the environment, and just seeing how you respond to that environment. Because especially if you're not that 5% of people who is already elite or very good at another athletic pursuit, some people have never been in that environment before. And if you've never been in that environment, it's a really stressful environment. I know that I still get nervous before comps. Like when I did my last comp a year and a bit ago, 2 years ago nearly, for like the 3 or 4 nights before, I was like, why can't I go to sleep? Like I normally have no problems going to sleep. And I was like, God damn it, I'm nervous. Fuck. Like I've been doing this for nearly a decade. Why am I so nervous? And You know, it's okay to be nervous. It's okay to be scared. It's okay to be a little bit intimidated. Like, all of these things are very normal for someone who's stepping into a competitive environment without a lot of experience. You know, before I got into powerlifting, I'd played 15 years of competitive sport. I'm a competitive athlete, and I know how to respond in those moments. So I know where to go. I still get nervous, but I know how to like harness those nerves and lean into that rather than pull away from it, you know? And so that's why I try and stress the idea for someone who has no experience in that, of not putting too much pressure on it. Don't change your training. Don't try and do all this new stuff and try and make that first competition your best competition ever, because there's so many unknown variables that are going to pop up over that course of that day. The biggest one is often like they get to deadlifts and they're completely exhausted because the emotional drain of a day that's 6 hours of lifting over, you know, a whole day is something that a lot of people haven't experienced, you know. And so I think if you go in to it with these really high expectations of your performance and you've done all this training, you've made it really serious and built it up as a really big thing in your head, then you're not going to do as well and you're not going to have a good time. And I think your first experience with any sport should be fun. I think sport in general should be fun. If you're not enjoying it and you're not making money out of it, what the fuck are you doing? And that's the mistake I've seen a lot of people make, is by committing to a meet, they're trying to change their training and push towards it, and they put all this pressure on themselves, and then all of a sudden they don't enjoy that first experience. And so then they never come back. And for me, that means we failed. You know, like we failed to convince someone that powerlifting's a thing for them, because it's a sport that I think anyone can do, right? That's my favorite part about powerlifting. It's so open to people of all shapes, sizes, ages, backgrounds, etc. But when you come into it with all this preconceived notions about how your performance is going to go, then you're less likely to enjoy the process.
Yeah. It's the concept of nerves is an interesting one. I was talking to someone else about this the other day, because like when we talk about nerves, what we're really talking about is adrenaline. It's like that flush of adrenaline. And from a biological evolutionary perspective, it's like, you know, I see a saber-toothed tiger, he sees me, adrenaline hits, get all those same feelings, and it's like,
run away.
do I fight this fucking tiger, or do I and risk getting torn in half, or do I run over there as fast as I can and try and cross the river and avoid it, or whatever, you know? And you know what to do in that situation. It's like really an easy choice. It's like, okay, well, I live or I die. Okay, I make that decision. When you're standing there and you've got a bar loaded to 80 kilos and you've got that same system saying this is where you live or die, so it's like, well, okay, well, you're not going to live or die under this. Yeah, it's nervous, but you're exactly right. Over time, that those nerves, that adrenaline, it's an energy system. You learn how to harness that energy, turn it into focus, and actually use it as a bit of a boost to lift the weight.
And amplify it as well, you know? Like, I know my pre-lift ritual with a bit of like some breathing exercises and stuff like that, I can get my heart racing, like my skin flushes. I give myself goosebumps because I'm riding that high as I can get it, so that by the time my hands hit that bar, I'm ready to fucking go. And I think like that's a skill, right? Learning how to ramp up into that and how to turn it off, which I actually think is the more important part of the skill, is how to come back down the other side of that mountain. It's something that takes practice. And so if you come into that first meet trying to be that person who's all amped up and having a great time, then I think you're gonna have a harder time than you think, because you'll get hit with all this adrenaline that you weren't expecting, and it makes life a bit harder.
So the other thing you touched on there is, and this is where I think our approaches to the novice comps kind of slightly differ, because you far more on the side of like fun environment, really good for the brand new lifter getting into it. And I know that you understand everything that I'm about to say, and you've applied it as well, and you've chosen to go the direction that you have. But I tend to see more the other side of that, in terms of like giving the lifter as close to the proper comp experience that they can have, and having a bit of pressure on them in terms of it being a competition. So for example, you've taken away the first, second, third overall. I actually really like that, but I'm not ready to implement it, because I feel like having defined parameters around who wins and who doesn't gives people the opportunity to know what it's like on the actual competition day. And it's like much of a muchness, right?
Yeah.
The actual competition experience isn't those minor things. But I guess I'm a little bit old school in the sense of like keeping it just as close to what they're going to experience when they do eventually, or if they do eventually decide to go down the sanctioned comp road. And I think both options are good options. I guess I'm just catering a little bit more to the people that are a bit more serious about the competition side of things. It's like you want to, because I'm the same as you, I want to discourage this kind of balls to the wall attitude of like, fuck yeah, this fucking serious competition. Bro, it's a novice competition. Most of the people around you are squatting 100 kilos. Big deal. You squat 220. Congratulations, you're a hero.
Yeah.
And at the same time, I want those people to turn into the people that are really taking it seriously and pushing the sport at a higher level. And it's like, this is the introduction to do that. So this is their practice round. So I don't want to hold them back too much from that, but I also don't want to encourage it and then spoil it for all the other people who are genuinely there just to experience the fun of their first competition or their second or third competition, you know? And it's like, we have to cater to everyone, but we don't want to upset anyone. So I think either approach works. And you did the other approach for a long time, and you've just switched to this approach. So I think I found how it goes.
I think I found our market was a little bit more towards the complete novice end. And so that's kind of why I went down that road. Now, like, don't get me wrong, I think participation certificates will be the death of society. Because I think competition is good, right? Like, I grew up playing sport. My son's going to grow up playing competitive sport because winning and losing is part of life. And if you're exposed to know that, like, the feeling of loss sucks, but it's the greatest fucking motivator in the world. Like, I know this, like, the first year of rugby I played first year of, like, open grade rugby I played in Canberra. So you like, play under 18s and then you go into Colts, which is under 20s. And then you have grade after that. So I played 2 years of Colts, and then the first year I played grade rugby, I played first grade for the whole year. So I took this jump up from a moderately successful Colts team to a first grade team, and we lost every game for a year. And like, not just like, oh, we just lost that one, like we got pummeled like hundreds of points nil, and it was fucking disheartening. But every week it was like, well, there's the motivation to get up and fucking do the work to be better than we were last week. And that motivating drive is so undervalued, I think, in modern society. So I'm all about the competition side of things, but I just like the idea of reframing the competition as it's not you're better than them because you lifted more weight. It's you're better than them because you were a good person who treated the volunteers well, who did all of these things that I think make up for or make the qualities of a good powerlifter. Be nice to the judges. Be nice to the loaders. Because I think too many people forget that, like, you and I make money out of this, right? Like, my business makes money out of novice comps. All of my helpers, the people that allow or facilitate these competitions, are volunteers. They do this in exchange for, in most cases, a burger and a beer at the end of the day. But they do it because they're a part of our community, and that's a value that we've instilled in people, and they want to be there. Like, I don't force anyone to be there. I'm never going to be the sort of person that's like, I expect you to be here because you're a member of this gym. I ask for volunteers, and people volunteer their Sundays to help us run comps. And so if you treat those people like assholes, then A, I'm going to have a go at you at some point. And B, I think you're setting yourself up for just like, you're going to be a part of a community that hates you, because powerlifting all across the country is run by volunteers. And if you if you treat these people like an asshole, you're an asshole. And that's why, it's not that you're not winning at our competitions now, you're still winning, but winning isn't just being strong. Because I found that what you get is, you get those people, like you said, who are that 5% of people that are already strong as fuck. and they come in and they just walk all over people. And I think that's a soft win. I don't think that counts, you know? I think that's as good as a participation certificate in my head, because you didn't really have to try, you know? If you win a novice comp on openers, it's not really winning. But if you can win a novice comp by picking good attempts, trying really hard, being really supportive of the people around you, and just not being a dickhead, then I think you're like, that's a real win at a novice comp from my point of view, which is why we went down the road that we did.
So but basically exhibiting all the qualities of a good quality powerlifting.
Yes. What we think makes a good powerlifter, and that's obviously going to vary from person to person and gym to gym and, you know, community to community, but these are the values that the Burley Strength family believe makes for a good powerlifter. I also had the other part that made this decision a bit easier for me was that I had a lot of people who the first question they ask about getting into powerlifting is, what are people my weight lifting?
Yeah.
And I think if that's your first question, you're doing it for the wrong reasons.
Yeah.
By all means, do a few meets, start looking at results in your weight class in federations, and start looking at like, okay, cool, now I've got something to shoot for. But if you're worried about what everyone else is doing in your first comp, you've missed the point. I don't know.
You know, the weirdest thing, people will contact me and be like, oh, I looked up and the records for this are this. I'm like, why are you looking at the records for your first comp? Like, you imagine that in any other sport. Okay, I'm going to sprint. Okay, the record is Usain Bolt. All right. That's what I'm shooting for.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, bro, let's run 100 meters in 20 seconds before you can do it in 8.
Exactly. And that's the thing for me, is by removing or shifting the focus of what a winner is in a novice comp, you remove the validity of that question. So rather than then having to spend 2 minutes going, well, you know, this is what someone's lifting, but it's not really about that. It's about turning up and doing the comp and having a good time, blah, blah, blah. We can just say, well, what you lift has very little relevance to whether you win or not.
So let's unpack what we were talking about before about what makes a good quality powerlifter, because I think that's the more tangible stuff that people listening can actually take away. And I think you covered a few things, like being respectful of the volunteers. When you go to the table and you put in your next attempt, don't just go 120. Go, can I have 120, please?
Yeah.
Well, my next attempt is 120, please. Thanks. Yeah. Be fucking polite. It's not that hard.
Yeah.
Don't get in anyone's way. Applaud for your fellow competitors. Pat your fellow competitors on the back. Offer to help out if they need a handout on bench. Give them a handout. You know, it's the day is for you, but it's for everyone else as well.
Share the equipment in the warm-up room.
Oh,
you know,
God.
help other people load weights and take weights off. Like, don't expect someone else to load your fucking plates. None of you are that important.
I'm making the call because we talked about this. We did a live video on Facebook ages ago about how we're going to make a podcast of like listing our top like 5 powerlifting comp dickheads and the like persona that they embody. We're doing this in the next couple of episodes.
Yep. Okay. So we're back, and we're going to talk about dickheads that you don't want to be at a powerlifting meet, or are we going to do that in a future episode?
That's a whole episode by itself.
Cool. Sweet.
Because we got to sit down and like work out some labels and
maybe we should do it at Pro Raw. Maybe we should, like, after you've competed, we'll have a few beers and make it like a proper ranty, maybe we're a little bit pissed kind of a episode. I'm keen for that. Maybe we have a top 5, and then for every type we have to do a shot. We could make this real dangerous. Drunk Thomas would be hilarious.
Drunk Thomas is not happening. I can promise you that. You can get me food drunk by buying extra burgers.
Burger drunk.
Grand Trailer Park.
Keen. All right, so we were talking about being a nice person in the warm-up room, and just generally, I think that's the thing that I've watched at too many powerlifting meets of all levels, not just novice comps, right, is this this like sense of entitlement. Like, just because you're strong, it's not an excuse to be an asshole. And I think I've just seen too many people who, in some cases, are quite famous, if that's the way you can describe a powerlifter, who just end up walking around the warm-up room like they own the joint. And I think the thing for me about powerlifting is if you lift more weight than me, that doesn't automatically make you a better person. And I think that stands for life in general, right? Not just from a strength perspective, but just because you earn more money doesn't make you a better person. And I think too many people in powerlifting get caught up in their own fucking hype show, which is really easy to do when you've got an Instagram following full of people who are in on the circle jerk and just spend their whole time blowing smoke up your ass. It's really easy, I think, to get that inflated ego. But for me, the best powerlifters I know, guys like Nathan Jones, Stenzel, those sort of dudes who are incredibly strong and at the top, in the top 1% of their weight class in the country and in some cases in the world, but they're also still really incredibly pleasant people and are the sort of people that understand that this is a sport that no one really gives a shit about except for powerlifters. And so when you walk around like you should be famous and like people should owe you something because you lift a lot of weight, I think you set yourself up for failure in the long term. It's not that hard to be nice to people. It's not that hard to... Like, you're not such an elite, finely tuned athlete that you can't pick up a 20 and put it on a bar for someone or run a gate for them in a mono or, you know, those sort of things. Be a bit flexible in your approach to warm-ups. I've seen people turn up at a novice comp with a list of like times that they have to do their last warm-ups at, and then it gets to a point where they're like, oh, we need this mono right now. It's like, well, no, there's 4 people in the line here. You're just going to have to wait. Like you don't get access to the piece of equipment at the time you want it because you've written your fucking times down. That's not how powerlifting works. We're all sharing the equipment. At our novice comps, we have 2 monos in the warm-up room. I really want to get a third, but we're not quite at that point yet. But we've got 4 other squat racks, and we've got 3 benches and 4 deadlift platforms. Like, there's plenty of equipment to go around. You're never going to have more than 15, maybe 20 people in a flight. Just fucking share. Like, this is childcare 101. Be nice to the person next to you and share your toys. But there's this selection of people who are unwilling to do that because they think they're better than everyone else.
I'm loving Ranty John right now.
Oh, man, some of these things really infuriate me. I've done this for long enough now that there are some things that I just won't fucking handle anymore. Like, that sort of attitude is a really quick way to really infuriate me on comp day. And I'm already, like, inevitably a little bit more anxious and a little bit more stressed than I normally would be. So you get down that road and fuck, man, I get really angry really fast.
See, I 100% get exactly what you're saying. I also see a little bit more of the other side of the coin in terms of like, some people need to have their little zone. Some people need to. Dude,
I get that. Because I was like that in my first meet as well. No, we're like on my ranty side, and this is how it works. You got to rant last week. We got to share it, Thomas. Share your toys. Okay,
I'm sorry, honey. You go.
No, I was just gonna say, I get the zone thing. And the problem is, I was this guy at my first meet. Like, I wasn't. Yeah. I'd like to think I wasn't a complete dick, but I've been down that road, and in hindsight, I was a dickhead.
Yeah. Because there are some definite people that act up, but I think the vast majority of people in our sport are actually really good, really respectful. I think, I fucking love the sport of powerlifting. It means so much to me. And I think a lot of people really love the sport of powerlifting and really love what they do and take it very, very seriously, especially at those higher levels. And you're right though. There's a difference between being in the zone and being super serious. Because I'm super serious and I get in my zone when I'm competing and when I'm lifting as well. However, like you say, it's just like the adrenaline equation. If you're switched on all day, you're just going to drain yourself. So it becomes a skill to know when to turn that attitude on and off, which is when you're warming up, just as you're getting under the bar. All other times you should be trying to relax, and part of relaxing is like chat to people, have a bit of a laugh, enjoy. Like think about things like Pro Raw or Nationals. You get to catch up with all your powerlifting friends from across the country. It's a good time. Yeah, and you need to have a good time there. That's what makes this sport so fucking cool and so fucking fun and so fucking lovable. And there are some bloodsuckers that can take away from that. It's interesting to watch at a like mid-level, so between novice comps and high-level comps, to watch that kind of attitude festering and thinking maybe this is going to be the thing that holds you back. But anyway, we're getting off track. We're talking about novice comps specifically and what makes for a good powerlifter. I think that was the more attitude side of stuff. In terms of the actual lifting side of stuff, I think we can touch on things like, don't be in the zone all day. You don't have to have your headphones in and be like hyped up all day. If anything, that's just going to be a detriment to your performance. You need to learn when to switch on and when to switch off.
Like that's the best skill I've learned in powerlifting. My first several meets, I spent a lot of the time walking around with heavy metal blasting in my headphones, amped up the whole time, and I could never figure out why by the time I got to deadlifts I was absolutely exhausted. And now where I have an approach where like I know I can flip that switch given 30 seconds, I don't need to drain myself of all that energy. And so by the time I get to deadlifts, I'm ready to party. Like this is the fun bit. We got through all the hard stuff. Now we get to do some fun stuff, and I enjoy it way more. Like it's not like, we have to do deadlifts now. It's fuck yeah, like squats and bench are done, let's do some deads and it's going to be a good time. So I think if you can manage that level of arousal across the whole day, you'll be way better off.
From a novice perspective as well, understanding how to choose attempts. So I know you and I both make a concerted effort from way before the actual novice comps and global emails and stuff like that to give advice on how to pick your first attempts and how to kind of structure your day in terms of attempts. But you shouldn't be failing opens and seconds because the weight was too heavy.
No.
The thing to ask yourself, and this is from beginner to absolute elite, and I remind all of my lifters this when it comes to attempt selection, when it comes to picking numbers for openers and seconds, is, are you going to the comp to fail your third attempts? Is your plan to fail any of your attempts? Well, of course it's not. So your openers and seconds are just stepping stones into your thirds.
Yeah.
The 9 for 9 thing, we were having a chat about this before, because like in general in powerlifting, 9 for 9 is kind of praised. I think we came to a bit of agreement before, because I was on the other side of the fence in terms of like I'm happy for my lifters to fail a couple of lifts in novice comps, especially third attempt deadlifts, because it's kind of the time to learn that. To know where the limit is, and to be like, okay, well, I'm your coach and I'm saying let's do 95. You really want to have a crack at 100? There's nothing on the line here because it's a novice comp. So I'm going to let you have a crack at that if you really want it, and you're going to see, okay, well, maybe I should have trusted Thomas, or maybe you're going to push yourself and find that inner strength and find out how to switch on a little bit more so you can get it up. So having that opportunity to push a little bit further than what you should push potentially is like a really good learning curve and a good way to grow in the sport as well.
Yeah, and as I said in our discussion off air, like I encourage people to go 9 for 9, but from a practicality standpoint, on a third deadlift, we're going to have some fun. Because by that point, all the hard work's done. Like you said, there's nothing really on the line. It's just about, okay, what happens now? Let's see how it goes. And potentially that's the opportunity to hit new PBs and do things like that. So at that point, I'm all about like, fuck yeah, let's have some fun and try something that maybe you're a little bit unsure of. Because for a lot of people, they haven't been in that situation of like a little bit of doubt, like that. So I posted a video just the other day of one of the most impressive deadlift grinds I've ever seen. One of the women that trains at our gym, Erica, she won the female best lifter for the weekend. Her third deadlift, I think, took her 10 seconds. And she pulled, dude, 100%. And like she just kept going. Like it just never stopped. And so she pulled her second deadlift, and I think it was 85. And I said afterwards, normally like the first question I ask the lifter is, how did that feel? She goes, it felt heavy. I go, okay, well, I knew she was capable of 90 because she's done it once before in the gym, I think. Yeah. And so I said, well, I think you should have a crack at 90, but you just need to know that it's going to feel really hard. And you just need to keep going. And she did. Like, to her credit, she did. And it was the most impressive deadlift grind I've seen in a long time. If you want to see it, go and check out the Burley page on Instagram. It's where by the time this episode releases, it's probably a few weeks back. But it was fucking epic, dude. And she came off, and you can see me in the background of the video because I was loading plates at the time with this huge smile on my face. And I went up to her and I said, "I told you that was going to feel hard." And she was like, "Oh, fuck it, dude." But what she did was go into a lift that she was a little bit unsure of, trusted in my advice of just keep going, and she got it. You know, and I've done that before and said, okay, well, if this is what you want to do for that third attempt, fuck yeah, I'm behind you, but know that it's going to be really hard. And for some people, like, you know, this is where the RPE scale comes in, right? Like, oh, that was an RPE 10. Like, you don't know what a 10 is until you've been to 11. And and you and I have been there. Like, I've had lifts that, like,
she hit.
Fuck, I almost died.
She hit a fucking 20.
Oh, dude, 100%. Like, a fly lands on that bar, she misses it. You know, like, the earth spins slightly faster at that point, gravity increases, she's done. Like, all of these things, that was absolute limit. And if you don't know what that feels like, sure, it's nice to have a crack at something like that. And I think with a deadlift, especially for a novice competition or for a novice lifter, the deadlift is the one where you can really test that. So that's why I tend to go, or aim to go, 3 for 3 on squats and bench, because the technical skill element for most lifters is the thing that lets them down in squats and bench. Whereas in a deadlift, it becomes a question of heart and how willing you are to keep going. Because I think it's a slightly simpler movement and it's a little bit more natural for a lot of people. So it's the one where you really can try and get to 10 in a novice environment. So I encourage 9 for 9, but if you go 8 for 9, it's because you really wanted to push the boundaries on a third deadlift. I'm okay with that too. Like, I'm not going to say no, don't take a PB attempt because I want you to go 9 for 9. I'm going to say, well, if you're confident, let's fucking do it, but don't half-ass it. You know, don't go in and be like, oh, maybe I'm going to get this. Like, come into it switched on and ready to fucking go.
Well, I mean, I think in kind of heading towards closing, it's a pretty simple formula. Don't be a dick. Have fun. Enjoy the day. You know, push yourself. Try really hard. Yeah. And
make new friends. That's the other thing that I think people, especially at a
embrace the community. Exactly.
Yeah, especially at a novice meet. Like, you're going to be in a room full of people who share at least some of the values that you do. Because no one turns up to a powerlifting meet if they don't already like lifting and training. So make friends. Like, potentially you meet people that train at different gyms, or maybe you meet someone that trains at the same gym you do that you've never met before, or these sort of things where you can meet the community, because it doesn't matter where you are in the country. The powerlifting community is strong and thriving. You and I both have powerlifting friends all over the country and the world, where in many cases the only thing we have in common is the fact that we like lifting weights. And that's not a bad thing. I've got plenty of friends who are just friends through powerlifting. And I think if you're, and this is where that idea of like being all fired up and headphones on and in the zone all day, I think you miss out on that. If you're the guy that walks around with your headphones cranked all day and you don't talk to anyone, you're missing out on a really great part of the sport. And the bit that I think is the best part of the sport is the community of people around it. And if you don't get to engage in that in your first meet, it's going to feel a bit more stagnant and awkward as you go forward. So if you can go into your first meet without much pressure, ready to have a good time and make some friends and enjoy yourself, I think you're going to be in the sport for a long time.
Yeah, and the thing to remember with this is that, you know, nerves, adrenaline, that affects everyone differently, but guarantee everyone in that back room is in the same boat as you, shitting themselves just as much as you are. It's just it's expressed differently in different people.
Exactly.
So if you're shitting bricks and you see someone laughing, you're like, why are they having such a good time? Don't worry, they're having a good time, but they're just as nervous as you are. Exactly. They've probably never spoken a word in their life, and all of a sudden the adrenaline hits, they don't know what to do with it, and they just get all giggly.
Yeah, man, and that's the thing I say, like when we do a lifters briefing at our novice comps, the first thing I say is, you know, thank you everyone for coming. I know some of you are going to be nervous. It's okay. Like, it's okay to be nervous. It's okay to be scared. It's okay to be intimidated. We're going to do our best to make this environment as supportive as we can. If in doubt, ask questions. Like, don't turn up not knowing the rules. I don't know how you guys do it, but in our in the lead up to our novice comps, we send out a video series that has me explaining all the rules and how the day is going to run and what we expect from depth in a squat and what a paused bench looks like and all of those sort of things. So if you haven't done at least the bare minimum work to kind of understand the rules, you're going to have a worse time. So invest a bit of time in just reading a rule book, or at least asking some questions. Like there are no dumb questions at a first powerlifting meet. And if you're willing to learn and you're willing to enjoy it, I think you'll have a good time.
For sure. All right. I think that's good.
Yeah, I think so.
Listen, watch, tell your friends, 5 stars, we love you, goodbye. Perfect. That was the best ending we've ever done.
Says you.
All right, catch us next time.
Bye.